Hey everybody, welcome back to the Crafty Yarn Barn. Today I'm going to show you how to make this cute little blanket. The stitch pattern is called Zig Zag. I used the Loop It yarn from Bernat. I had all these scraps left over and I used those to make this striped blanket. It's going to be a Christmas present for my little cousin. She's 12 years old. I thought all these fun colors, she would like those. So let's go on up to the craft room and I'll show you how to make this blanket. All you need to make this project is the Bernat Blanket Easy yarn or any other brand of the Loop It yarn that you have, and a pair of scissors. You don't need any knitting needles or crochet hooks to make this project. Super easy and fun. So let's talk about the structure of the blanket for a moment so you'll know how much yarn you'll need and how big this blanket works out to be. So it's 48 inches wide by 62 inches long. I use 70 loops for my foundation. If you want to make that blanket any other width or height, just as long as you keep your foundation row even number, you should be good. Just figure out how wide you want it and just count out your loops, and the number needs to be an even number. I used this yarn that was 18 yards per skein, and I needed 7 skeins of yarn. One of these skeins should make 10 rows for you if you're using this foundation of 70 loops. This blanket foundation chain is 70 loops, and then it's 69 rows that you're going to work up. So you'll need 126 yards of yarn. So the pattern on the blanket, it's called Zig Zag, and you see how the pattern goes, it's zigzagging down on the rows vertically. Really fun and easy. So let's get started and I'll show you how to work out this pattern. For the blanket that I'm going to show you how to make, if you're going to make it the size that I've made, you need 70 loops for your foundation. I'm only going to do 10 loops because I'm just going to do a small swatch to show you how to make the stitch pattern. So I always like to leave a tail. I don't like to just start out just with this loop right here. I leave a tail so I can sew it in to make sure that the end of this blanket is secure. It's not going to come apart. I always have a fear of that. So I cut about 5 or 6 of these loops open and make a tail on it. And when you look at these loops, if this is the first time for you, you can pull them apart and there's a little bit of a string right there that sews those loops together, and that's what you're cutting. You're not cutting into the yarn, and you can feel with your fingers right here that yarn is sewed together by a piece of thread. You can feel that thread, and you just snip it and it comes right open. Okay, now I'm going to start my blanket. Let me lay it out here so you can see. I'm going to only count out 10 loops. You go ahead and count out however long you're going to make your blanket. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, right here, I'm going to take my yarn. This is my 10th loop. This is the last loop on my foundation. I'm going to take this next loop and I'm going to bend it behind there, and the loop that I have back here, I'm going to stick it through that loop from behind and pull it up. Okay, that's called a knit stitch. This first row, I'm only going to do knit stitch. So the next loop on this working yarn, what's connected to your ball of yarn over here, you're going to take that loop, and on the next stitch here on your foundation, the loop, you're going to take the one in your working yarn, push it through from back and pull it up from front. You're going to do this all the way across. You're going to do knit all the way across. So push it from the back to the front. Take the next loop on your working yarn. This right here is my foundation row. Take it from the back, push it through the front, and do that all the way down to the very end. When you get to the end, stop, and I'll show you how to make your turn and then how to start your zigzag stitch pattern. See you in just a moment. With my last stitch. Now this is the very end. Now I'm going to take this yarn and I'm going to work back the other way. So this is my last stitch that I did, and then this is the next loop on my working yarn, the one that's connected to my ball of yarn. So I'm going to take it and I'm going to do a knit stitch again. Take it from the one here on the working yarn, and on the last loop that I stuck through here, I'm going to push it from the back to the front, so I'm going to knit. Now on my blanket, as it's laying out that I'm making, this last stitch here is always going to be a knit stitch. This last stitch here on this end is also going to be a knit stitch. In the middle of the blanket, in between those last stitches, is going to be my zigzag. I always end a row and start a row with a knit stitch. Now, every 2 stitches, they're going to be buddied up, okay? And what that means is they're going to be doing the zigzag. So this first loop that's on this working yarn here, I'm going to take it, I'm going to skip this loop, and then I'm going to take the second loop and going to knit so I'm going to pull it through from back and pull it up front. Now this next loop on my working yarn right up here that's connected to my ball of yarn, I'm going to take it, and the one that we just skipped, now I'm going to knit. So I'm going to push it through from back to front. Okay, so you see right here how it crossed over? That's going to be the start of your zigzag. So now on your foundation, the next 2 loops, what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip this loop, and I'm going to take this loop and do a knit. So my next loop that's on my working yarn that's connected to my ball of yarn, I'm going to take it, skip this loop, and I'm going to put it into the back and pull it up front. The one that I just skipped, now I'm going to take the loop of yarn here on your working yarn, and then I'm going to push it into the one and do a knit into the one I just skipped. So you see how it's starting the zig over to the right. When we come back, we'll zag and go the other way, so it's zigzag. Alright, so now my next 2 loops on my row beneath that I just finished, I'm going to skip this one and go to this one. The next loop on my working yarn, I'm going to take the next loop and stick it into the second one there. The first one that I skipped, now I'm going to take it, and then the next loop on my working yarn, I'm going to stick it into it. I'll go all the way to the very end, skip this one. Now you're going to take this one and you're going to knit, go back to the one you skipped. The next loop of yarn on your working, you're going to stick it into that. Go all the way down to the very end. The last loop here doesn't have a buddy to it, it's on its own. So you're going to take the next loop on your working yarn and you're just going to knit. There's no crossing over or zigzagging on the last one. Okay, now you're going to take your yarn and you're going to go back the other way. In the next loop of yarn on your working yarn, you're going to stick it into that loop from behind and pull it up. Like I told you earlier, this last loop on each row, they're always going to have a knit into it. Once you do that, then you start your zigzag. So these next 2, you're going to take this first loop here that's free, and you're going to skip this one and go into this one and push it in from behind and pull it up. Now the one that you skipped, you're going to grab it, the next loop of yarn on your working yarn, you're going to pull up the yarn from behind in it. The next loop, you're going to skip this one and go to the next one, and you're going to push it in from behind and pull it up. The one that you skipped, now you're going to pull it up, and the next loop on your working yarn, you're going to knit into it. When I say knit, just means that you're going to go from behind and pull it up through to the front. And you're going to do that all the way across. The next loop on my working yarn, I'm going to skip this one and go into this one. The one that I skipped, I'm going to grab it. And the next loop on my working yarn, I'm going to knit into it. The next loop, I'm going to skip this one and go into this one. Go back to the one I skipped. I'm going to knit into it. Now this is my very last one on that row, and I'm just going to knit. And now you can see where it's starting to do the zigzag. Okay, so it's the same pattern all the way through to the end of the blanket. And when you get to the very last row, what I want you to do on the very last row, you're going to knit stitch. You're not going to do any zigzag. So to knit, you would be doing just like you did on that first row. You would take your yarn, and then you're going to push it in from behind. You're going to just continue to knit all the way across without the zigzag pattern. The first row is a knit, and then your last row is a knit. Do that all the way down to the end, and then I'll show you how to fasten off your work. Okay, now, and you can see the zigzag, knit, and then zigzag, and then the very last row of your blanket, you'll knit. Now, to finish off this blanket, or the project, whatever you're making, a cowl or a scarf, I'm just going to cut my yarn. Then I'm going to snip open probably about 3 or 4 of these loops. And just snip them right open. And I'll show you how to finish off. Now, when you get to the end, here's your yarn tail. You're going to start at the opposite end over here. And all you're going to do to finish off is to take this loop of yarn and you're going to stick it into the loop of yarn that's next to it and pull it up. You're going to take this loop and stick it from bottom and pull it up to the top. And you're going to do this all the way across from the bottom and pull it through to the top. And this is called casting off when you're knitting. And you're going to do that all the way to the end. So this is my last loop. You're going to take it and you're going to push it through just like you have been all the way down. Now here is my yarn tail. So what I'm going to do is take this yarn tail and pull it through. Now it has a little loop there, right? So then instead of pulling it all the way through, I'm going to take this yarn tail here and I'm going to stick it through. And then I'm going to actually pull it through. And what that does is creates a little knot. And I'm going to hold here at the end, and then I'm just going to pull it really tight. I'm going to turn my blanket over in this yarn tail, these yarn tails that I have. I'm going to turn them over and I'm going to work them through and hide them in my work. So I'm just going to take this yarn, and you see where there's a loop there. I'm going to just stick it through and pull it through and hide it in there and just work it down about 4 or 5 inches and just hide it into here. Just kind of follow along with where the yarn is going and push it through, and you're just weaving it in, and so that nobody sees that yarn tail. And when you feel comfortable that you've gone far enough, I usually do mine about 4 or 5 inches. I always am worried that the project's going to come loose. I don't know why. Just something that I worry about. It never has. I've been crocheting and crafting for years. So then once you weave it in, you get your scissors and you just snip off that tail. And it's hidden right there into the back of your work. No one will even see it. And then that's how to make the zigzag stitch pattern for the blanket. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them below. Make sure you like and subscribe. And I have other tutorials for Loop It Yarn. There's some tips and tricks and hacks. So I'll have that in a playlist for you, or in the comments below there'll be links. If you have any problems, just feel free to reach out and I'll be happy to help. God bless, and you have a great day.